Hello, everyone. Welcome to Organization Development's first virtual blog. Before I get into and really describe what we're doing the virtual blog for, I'll first introduce myself. My name is Jordan Miller. I'm a learning and development specialist here with Organization Development in HR. I've been a part of this team. I actually just started in February, so right before all the COVID-19 crisis happened, I started in OD. But I've been at Pitt a little bit over 3 years. I was in talent acquisition for a while, and I'm very excited to be in this role and bring these blogs to you here today. So the reason we wanted to kick off this blog, we were thinking of some different ideas of how to get creative while working at home. And what we thought was, let's create a virtual blog where we can spotlight leaders across the university. So two things we wanted to get out of the virtual blogs. Number one, we wanted to highlight our leaders. So we wanted to let you know who's leading our schools, who's leading our department, who's leading our university, and let you learn a little bit about them. But we also wanted you to be able to learn a little bit about their leadership style, how they cultivated that leadership style, how they continue to lead the department, and how they got to the position that they're in. So to kick off our virtual blog, and I'll be introducing our guest that we have here with us today. Our first spotlight leader has been the Dean of Dental Medicine here at the University of Pittsburgh for over 2 years, and he has been at the university since 2001. So he's very familiar with the university, and we're very excited and humbled to have him with us here today. Dental medicine has a great reputation here at the university, and not only at the University of Pittsburgh, but across all universities across the country and across the world as well. So we are very excited, very humbled to introduce Dean Bernard Costello. Dean Costello, welcome, and thank you for kicking this off for us. We couldn't have a better leader to do it.
Hi, Jordan. Thanks. Appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and your group. Your group has done such great work for us individually at the department level and school level, and also for the university. So happy to be a part of this.
Yes, thank you. So to kind of give all of our listeners out there, now Dean Costello is our first leader. We're going to have other leaders as we move forward. So I want to give you an idea of how we're kind of kicking this off in the way that it's going to be formatted. So it's going to be an interview style format where I'll be interviewing Dean Costello. So I'll be asking the questions. He'll be giving all the great answers. But we'll start off with a couple icebreakers just to kind of get things started. And then we'll really get into those leadership style questions. And I'm hoping that you're all able to pull something from this, and maybe this helps you cultivate and build your own leadership style. And I'm hoping you could take this back to your teams with you. For you. So, Dean Costello, this might be the hardest question you get all day. What's your favorite building at Pitt?
Oh, that's not a hard one, actually, but I appreciate the deference. My favorite building is the cathedral, and that sounds like a little bit of a cop-out because, it's our most famous building, tallest academic structure in the Northeast, if not North America. But there's a specific reason why I like it. I like old architecture. I like what it represents. But there's a bit of a story that links it to the dental school. When it was being built in the earlier part of last century, one of the early deans of the dental school, which started at the turn of the 1800s to the 1900s, kind of went a little bit rogue and started his own fundraising campaign to raise money for a new building for the dental school. And partway through that process, as he became pretty successful, the administration ran out of money for the cathedral. So they borrowed, if you will, the funds that the dean had collected for the dental school to finish off, literally top off the cathedral. So we're inextricably linked to the building, which is magnificent and glorious, and we are somewhat responsible for as a school. Back then, there was a bit of a promise to make good on the opportunity to get a new building. For various reasons, that actually didn't happen, and we're still in a 1930s building. So I am trying to make good on that promise. The university is committed to get us a new building at some point soon, and we're working on that now with the administration. So that's why it's my favorite building.
I never knew that. I've grown up a Pitt fan my whole life, and I'm honored to obviously be able to work at Pitt, and I learned something new, and that's a tremendous story. And I never knew that it tied back to dental school, but that's awesome. And thank you for that. The next one we have here is, and this was one actually Mark Birdsall and I were doing a little research on and thought this would be a great question to find out. So research shows that ages 10 to 13 are really the most influential time for a child, somebody growing up. So what was your favorite class in junior high, and maybe who was your favorite teacher and why?
Well, I had a couple teachers in this space of a discipline. For me, it was music, and that might not seem like an obvious choice for somebody who's a surgeon and an administrator now, but music taught me a couple of things, and I think it does that for a variety of folks. I had a teacher named Mr. Gaffol, who was in the Army and was in the Army band as a saxophone player, and he was both my private teacher as well as school teacher in a lot of this space, and made me a very interested person in music. For me, performing as a musician does a few things for you for the young minds at that particular age when you're in that middle school and high school age. One, it prepares you to perform for others and be comfortable preparing something and then performing it for other people's ears. So deans, administrators, teachers in general, you have to be comfortable doing that. And if I'm comfortable at all, it's because I was a musician when I was young, playing in front of folks. And then I'm a jazz musician. The second part of that is that really requires that you improvise. So for those that don't know jazz, there's a structure and form that you follow. And then in the middle section, typically soloists improvise. And that is something you have to sort of do on the fly using the structure, but also react to other people in the room, and in this case, musicians. So if the drummer plays soft, you react to that and perhaps play soft or sort of use it as something that you do as it's happening. If the piano player plays a particular riff, you react to that. And it's the same thing I do in meetings now with my colleagues when we're trying to solve problems. You react to the things that are going on in the room, and it makes you very comfortable doing that, having that type of experience. So I encourage music for everybody.
And thank you. And when I was growing up, I did drums in middle school, and I also played baritone. So
Yeah.
those aren't, I guess the drums is kind of like a cool instrument, I guess, but the baritone doesn't get a lot of love. And I actually really enjoyed playing it, but it taught me a lot about music. And my music teacher as well has been very influential on my life and my career. But you still play. I think I did hear that in there, correct?
I do. I mostly drive my kids to their lessons these days, but I do play a little bit. In fact, we just played as a trio, my two kids and I, for one of my kids' recitals
Oh, wow.
last Sunday. So I don't have the chops I used to have, but I still like it a lot.
You're probably being humble there. I bet you still got it.
Maybe when I retire.
Well, thank you. So those were the couple icebreakers. Now we're going to get into the good stuff, the leadership questions, and we're really going to get into your career and how you got into leadership and really what interests you about leadership. So before we get into this, you know, I'm very excited to learn from you. Like I said, dental medicine has such a great reputation, not only here at Pitt, but across universities, across the world, across the country. And I know that has, started before your leadership, but you've obviously been able to carry that legacy on. So excited to hear about maybe how some of the ways that dental medicine has changed under your leadership, but also what maybe you carried on from past leaders as well. So the first question we have here for you is, can you tell us a little bit about your career path and really what led you into the role that you're in today?
Sure. I was interested in healthcare as a kid. My mom was a nurse, an emergency room nurse. And as an interested individual with a mom that cared about her child's future, she introduced me to physicians of various types. And every single one I met told me not to go into healthcare. And mind you, this was back in the 70s and 80s, where, when I was a small kid and adolescent, where things were changing at that time. Certainly it continues to change. I met an oral and maxillofacial surgeon, which is the specialty that I do, along my training a little bit later when I was in college. And I thought this was the perfect blend of the things that I loved about the medicine side, as well as a very focused, specialized area of dentistry, which also seemed to have kind of exciting elements to it. So I cross-trained or dually trained in those disciplines to do this specific type of surgery. And that sort of brought me through the process. I got interested in pediatrics and craniofacial abnormalities, cleft lip and palate, and other birth defects. That brought me to Pittsburgh because there was a real need here to do that at Children's UPMC. and at the dental school. So it was a really great opportunity to be at a world-class institution, have an impact, and then also work my way up the opportunity ladder. There are some opportunities in surgical academics to have leadership, running a program, a residency program, for example, and in other ways. And along the way, the deanship opportunity came to pass. And it was really the best way I could think of to have an even broader impact across more individuals, students, faculty, staff, a whole enterprise, and try to make it go and go faster.
Now, do you still perform, like, so the dean position, are you still able to perform surgeries and do that part of it as well as your role as dean?
Yep. So I had two really important mentors that were both deans of dental schools that I have been associated with. One was Tom Braun, who was the dean before me here at Pitt. He also was an oral and maxillofacial surgeon. And the other one was a guy named Ray Fonseca, who wrote most of the books in our specialty when I was coming up in training. And he was the dean of the University of Pennsylvania School of Dental Medicine, where I attended my dentistry training as well as medicine and surgical residency. And both of them did the same thing. They limited their practice to the things that they really loved. And the rest of the time, they were the dean. So I essentially work about 10 to 25% of my time purely in the cleft craniofacial realm. Unlike other surgeons that might cover a really broader area, particularly when you're younger, and lots of different things that they have expertise in. I just focus on these areas in particular, and the rest of the time I focus on the dean administrative roles. And I find that important and found it important about these two individuals because it made them relevant to the space. One of the things that you hear sometimes in leadership positions is, oh, you can't really relate to the people that you're leading because you're not doing what they're doing. So for me, it was really important to stay relevant in that space and still be performing some level of surgery, albeit a narrow area.
And I'm glad you said that because that is so important, right? To be able to relate and to be able to show people, I'm doing it over here, and I'm also, so you lead by example in some ways. But I was going to ask you how common that was that people in the leadership space in those dean level roles were still able to practice and perform surgery. It doesn't sound like it's super, super common, but you were obviously able to find the balance and inspiration from a couple others.
Yeah, I would liken it to lots of other areas. So the reason that people typically get administrative roles is that they've been successful in other areas. And, I am still a successful surgeon doing my thing, although it's in a narrow area now. If you're a successful investigator, PhD in science, basic science, you may rise to the dean level or senior vice chancellor level or even higher. And you may still have a lab. In fact, often those individuals still have laboratory activity. They're not going to commit 100% of their time to that area because they have other responsibilities, and they often have an infrastructure with them that works with them to do that. Or if you're a scholar, like Provost Cudd is, she still writes. She still does a lot of different things. Same for a lot of our other leaders in the cathedral and throughout the university. We're still relevant in our spaces, just in a different way.
And that's why I'm so glad to have you here today. Like I said, I've been at Pitt for 3 or 4 years, and this is information that I don't think across the university that we generally know. I think we see deans, high level positions as, okay, well, that's what they focus on and that's what they do. But there's so much more that goes into how you got there and what you perform on a daily basis. So that's why I'm so glad that we're able to spotlight you here today and to be able to talk about your experience and how you got here. So thank you, Dean Costello.
Sure.
The next question we have, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what got you interested in leadership? And then if you could define your leadership style, how would you kind of define that?
Yeah, I like the idea of servant leadership. I mean, my job is to facilitate other people's success. That's what I think, the dean position is really all about. I'm sure there are mechanical, logistical things that, all administrators have to do. It's evaluation season. We're doing evaluations right now. Those things are necessary, but the opportunity to connect with individuals and hearing their stories about what they care about, what their hopes and dreams are for their own careers, whether that's a student, a faculty member, or a staff member, that's really fun activity. It's very impactful as well. So you get to work across multiple interdisciplinary areas. You get to interact with all types of folks that have high levels of talent. And even the problem solving, even the difficult things, the chances to get through those problems and reshape something that's difficult into something that's good on the other side of that process, what you all do in ODI. Those are fun opportunities, not necessarily at the beginning of the challenges, but certainly hopefully by the time that you're done addressing those problems and reshaping the issue, that's very satisfying and it's impactful across lots and lots of people. So it's about facilitating success, for your organization through others.
Right. And it seems like with your leadership style, like you said, it's understanding the individual, buying into those individuals, and really getting the best out of them. And I've been fortunate enough in my few years here at Pitt and throughout my career to be able to have great leaders. And I think Mark Birdsall does a great job of that as well. But it's so important of who the leaders that we have, and how they take an interest in our careers and what we can do. So the next question I have for you, and you kind of touched on this because you talked about cultivating young minds and helping to develop their careers and lead them. But in the role that you're in today, what do you enjoy most about it? So in your ideal perfect day, perfect year, what do you enjoy most about your role?
I love seeing the success of the people that are in our organization and how that unfolds. So that might be a student or resident that I had, a decade ago, have a new level of success. I had one individual who just recently got a names professorship at the University of Michigan, who was one of my early fellows, surgical fellows in the specialty area that I trained, residents and fellows in. And that's really exciting to see that happen. It's obviously exciting to see that happen for our students too, the people that, reach their goals and maybe more. The same for faculty members. When somebody gets tenure, when somebody gets a new position, even if it's outside of our organization and we lose them to someone else, if it's good for their career and it's something that they really wanted, then that's great. That's really, the fun of building somebody into the next phase of their life and career.
Absolutely. And I'm glad to hear that the students and the people that you teach and you continue to build and guide, they still reach out to you, because that means that just like your music teacher had on you, you're having an impact on their career in such a way that they're able to reach out to you and really give you a lot of the credit for helping them get to where they got. So and I know that they appreciate that, and I know that probably makes you feel very, very good on your end too. So.
Yeah, it does. But you hear that sort of reference to, the opportunity to not take the credit and spread it around. That's a real thing. I think these things are collective efforts. So doesn't matter how good I am individually. It's really about the environment that you help facilitate and people's own efforts. Can't really make anybody do anything, nor can you ultimately provide everything that they need. Even if I had all the budget money in the world, it's ultimately up to the collective group of individuals that we have to make their own success happen for them. We can only suggest and provide a platform to make those things happen. So.
Absolutely. So the next question we do have for you. So getting to the point that you're at today, there's been ups, there's been downs, there's been good, there's been bad. And there's probably been a lot of teaching moments, right? That somebody's taught you, or maybe you had to learn on the job. So what's one thing that you wish somebody would have told you early in your career, maybe that you didn't know that you had to learn as you kind of grew through your roles in your career?
Well, maybe even particularly for somebody like me, who's a super subspecialist in a small area of surgery, pediatric craniomaxillofacial surgery, it would be to broaden your experiences. So, you should get as much as you can possibly get out of every experience that you have. So looking back, it's always easier to sort of see how these things unfold. But I can think of moments when I was a musician where, I built teamwork skills, group dynamic skills. I can think of, specific challenges that I thought at the time were incredibly difficult and things that I was not enjoying at the time because they were, potentially career changing challenges. And, you work your way through those things. And if you're smart about it, you work them to your advantage, meaning that you learn something from the experience and then try to take it forward so it makes you stronger and you use that experience for others around you, whether it's to help people get through a similar challenge or to solve it better the next time that it comes up, if it happened to be a difficult challenge. So everything you do has a potential advantage. And I think the people that are hungry for more opportunity and hungry to make more of an impact, you try to take those experiences forward, remember them, and use them.
So, and thank you. So for some, now we're going to have a lot of different listeners here who are at different points in their career. What advice would you have for somebody? So me, I'm very early in my career, so I'm able to maybe branch out and broaden my horizons and my skills a little bit more. What advice would you give to somebody who maybe they have 10, 12 years in at the university and maybe they feel like, oh, I've been doing this for so long. This is what I have to do. This is all I can do. How do you kind of give them advice on how to maybe do exactly what you said, branch out, gain new experiences to kind of continue their career?
Well, I think it's about making contacts with people in different spaces than what you're used to. And, for me, that's interdisciplinary opportunities. Some of the most fun that I've had at the university in particular has been working with people outside of my building. People in my building are great, but the people outside my building have different perspectives just inherently based on what they've experienced. And that could be culturally, that could be academically, that could be administratively. And your opportunity to be able to work with somebody on some ad hoc committee from, arts and sciences or from the business school or from, the medical school in a different area of research, for our investigators, for example, those are really valuable opportunities to gain a different perspective, to gain new skill sets and see how other people do things that you can then bring back to your environments. And, something like, the business skill set, for example, management, nonprofit control, financial aspects. Those were all things that I got out of my realm of surgery. Most surgeons are not going to be trained in, budgets, revenues and expenditures and things of this nature. So to have a grasp of that, and more importantly, have a working pragmatic knowledge of those things, that you need to go outside to get those opportunities. So those are real important things that I try to let folks know early in their career, that they should be looking for those types of opportunities that are not your typical path.
Right. And thank you. That's a tremendous answer. And because I've seen this a lot through my career at Pitt, especially in talent acquisition. Sometimes there's this, that kind of takes the breath out of people. It kind of deflates them. They feel that they've been in this career path for so long and they want to change. And I don't think they always know how to. And I think, because again, we're going to have listeners of all different skill sets, of all different amount of years at the university and different roles too. So I think that gives them an idea. And Dean Costello, thank you for that. I think it will help some people really listening to this. So.
Sure.
All right. So the next question here, I'm glad I'm not being asked this question. I said this, I'm not much of a reader. And I've tried to be a reader. I try to sit down and then my mind just goes a million different ways. I am 100% more a movie person. But if you were stuck on an island, what's one book you would take with you and why?
I love that kind of a question, because it makes you think about how you're going to spend your time and what sort of value knowledge is to you, or entertainment for that matter, if it's sort of a fun book. For me, I guess it would depend. So I'm going to take a little bit of a cop-out answer. So if I'm on the island by myself, like completely alone with no other people,
that's it. Just you.
Then I'm taking something philosophical with me, because the life of the mind, academics, sort of thinking about existence and thinking about your place in the world. Maybe that's important. If I brought a mathematics textbook or even a textbook of medicine to make sure that I tried to stay healthy, it would only go so far. I could only read it so many times. But philosophy is one of those things that you can think about for the rest of your life. So there's a book by Bertrand Russell called The History of Western Philosophy, I think it is. That's kind of a summary of Western philosophy. It's not quite a textbook because it's also a commentary by him on all these different philosophers. And I think I could probably spend my time pretty effectively thinking about those different philosophers as well as what he said about them. If it was an island of a bunch of people, though, I'd bring a book called Bargaining for Advantage, which is a book by Richard Shell. He was a professor in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania. And it's a book on how to craft deals of all different types. So when you're working with people to try to have collective success, it's a really good book to sort of understand how to do that. And I think I'd probably need that if it was a group of people on an island with limited resources and you're trying to have it not end up like Survivor.
Absolutely. And I love how, again, the book changes depending on your situation, right? So the situation you're in can dictate the book or the style that you want to have. So I know if I was stuck on an island, I would 100% need Survival Guide 101, because I would not be able to do that on my, so I would need something like how to build a boat, how to cut down a tree, how to do this. That's what I would need. But I want to ask you another question kind of off of that. So obviously we're getting into leadership styles here and leadership ideas. Are there any, not that you would have to take on an island with you, but for the listeners today, are there any leadership books that you have read that you would recommend to our listeners that maybe have given you some ideas, or maybe it's even something you read and said, well, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to do this a different way? Are there any leadership books that come to the top of your mind that you could maybe give our listeners an idea of what they could read maybe?
Sure. That last one I mentioned actually is a bit of a leadership book.
Okay.
It's in the negotiation category, but that can be your typical leadership book, even the ones you find at the airport that are ubiquitous and kind of, timely in the business space, maybe. They can be a little dry, especially if they have, very academic oriented graphs and the things my friends at Cats would love. But if you want sort of practical tips and how people in a narrative way deal with different situations, whether it's, negotiating a treaty between Israel and Palestine, or negotiating, the purchase of a car, or negotiating the building of a new center where resources are fixed and you understand that it's collaborative. All of those situations are completely different types of negotiation. The last one being one that people want to work towards a common goal that's good and it's collaborative. And that's mostly what we do at the university in that space. So I found that book really effective because it talks about it in a narrative and historical style, giving examples of other types of negotiations from the past and how you can use that to frame what you want to accomplish in a group when you're trying to get something for, your enterprise, but I still need to work with someone else because there's limited resources, like a conversation we might have now when budgets are tight, those types of things.
Right. And I think that's so interesting. Because I think what I'm hearing there too is, especially when it comes to books or readings or continuing education, sometimes you can take something from somewhere that it wasn't even maybe meant for that purpose, but you're able to take that over and apply it to real life situations. Where again, negotiating to buy a car, right? You're not going to do that in your business life, but you're able to take things to learn from that negotiation piece to put into leadership, because a lot of it is give and take. So what is that negotiating and how do you kind of build that in? But I think it's so cool how you're able to take little things like that and put it into real life practice. And obviously have built your leadership style through things like that and have used on your team. So thank you. Thank you very much for that. So,
Sure.
all right, two more. So was your current, so the role that you're in now, the current leadership role, was that what you expected it to be? So when you took the job on, was it everything you expected it to be and more?
Sure. I guess the answer for most people in my position is probably yes and no, because you look into these things very carefully when you make this kind of a decision to take a job like this. It's a challenging job. I don't mind telling you, when I was a shiny new assistant professor, I looked at my predecessor, Tom Braun, and thought, oh my God, that's the last job I would want. Everybody complains to the dean. They're always asking for money, and money he probably doesn't have. And it's got to be a challenge. And then there's these other challenges, sometimes lawyers and all sorts of things, right? HR problems.
Right.
And, of course, those things are there. So that there are some challenges with any job, right? But the opportunity to really build and have an impact, like we were talking about before, those are the things that start to come into view as you work with an organization even more. And those things I also did expect. What, is unexpected are the things that you can't predict unless you have a crystal ball. So COVID, what we're experiencing right now. No way anybody would have predicted that last year, let alone when I took my job a couple of years ago. So, you react and you work with others to try to make things happen. The real opportunities are things that you look for and try to take a situation that might be tough and really find the silver linings and move through it. So I guess inherently you might expect that something unexpected is going to happen when you take a job like this. You just don't know what those things are going to be. They change plans. You can have a beautiful, well-crafted strategic plan for your enterprise, and then it can all change, with any number of circumstances. You have to be able to adapt to those things. And like I mentioned before with, improvisation, I sort of like that. As long as it's not a devastating change, we've managed to make our way through COVID reasonably well so far. We'll see where it goes.
I was watching something last night, and exactly what you said kind of goes to. So I was watching this 30 for 30 on Bruce Lee, and one of my favorite Bruce Lee quotes is just "Be water, be water." And they ask him why, and he said because water can take any shape, any form that it needs to. And that's kind of, and I'm hearing that in a lot of what you're saying is you don't know what challenges are going to be put in front of you. So, like you said, unless you have a crystal ball, you don't know what's 5 years, 10 years down the road. So when you take one of these positions, you really got to be able to be water and kind of roll with those punches and really adapt and change and evolve it as you kind of go through this role. I don't think I see that. I'm not saying at Pitt, but I think that's something that a lot of leaders, sometimes they can get stuck in their ways. So I think it's very nice to see and refreshing to see that you're able to roll and kind of adapt with what happens. So
I think you have to. If I can add to that,
mm-hmm.
so Bruce Lee is a good example. You could pick tons of successful people in any sector you want. One of the common threads tends to be that people are relentless in their pursuit of success. They find their way to success no matter what they have to navigate around. Hopefully in an appropriate ethical way, of course, but they're relentless in sort of seeing that, envisioning it, and then getting there somehow, even when they run into an obstacle. And that's necessary in environments like this, like we've had in 2020. It's been unbelievable from a historical perspective, what we've been enduring the last couple of months on cultural levels as well as biologic viral levels. So Pat Gallagher said this to a group of us fairly early on, and it's commonly said at moments like this, great organizations will figure out a way around these challenges and come out the other side stronger. The weak ones will die and wither, and we're not going to be the latter.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Last question. So every leader wants their employees to be satisfied with their jobs, right? You talked about that. You want to see people be successful. So how can you tell if somebody really loves their job? What does that kind of look like when you see that someone loves their job? I know that's kind of a hard question, but what does that kind of look like to you?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a hard question, but in some senses it isn't. They're my favorite people to talk to. So, it doesn't matter if you're driving a cab, playing in a band, CEO of a bank. If you love your job, it's often the case that you can't stop talking about it. And you want to tell other people about it. I could get off a plane, get in a cab in any city, and I can tell if the cab driver sort of is enjoying his life and maybe his job based on the stories that they tell and what they want to talk about. And you love people like that are just passionate about what they're doing, no matter what it is. If they love what they're doing, they're going to want to tell you about it and tell you where they want to go with it and what they can do with it. And, for people at the university within our enterprise or in other areas, those types of folks are generally very successful. They're forward looking, they're thinking about where they want to go, what they can do with their opportunity. They're not satisfied with where they are, not in a way that feels bad, like, oh, I'm not happy with my job, but what can I do next? What can I contribute next? What keeps me going? What keeps me interested in, moving my unit forward? Those are the folks that you can tell love their jobs and are going to be really impactful in their spaces in a productive way, particularly if they can work well with others.
And I think that's so cool. And what you said there about just they have that exuberance, they have that love, and just that outward love for what they do. And they, like you said, they have that smile on their face. They have that energy. We were doing we have supervisor support chats where we bring in, other leader, throughout the university to come in and talk about certain topics. And we actually brought in one of dental medicine's leaders, Jim Earl. And he gave this story about this kind of where I think he flew to Miami or something like that, and he got off the plane and he met this taxi driver, and he told a story about this gentleman and how this gentleman had had some ups and downs in his life, and he was at this point right now, and he said, "I'm going to be the best cab driver you ever had." And he said you could just see the love that he had for people, and you probably heard this story, and love for that job. And you know, I think there's so many people, I think, that wake up and don't really enjoy what they do. So it's probably really refreshing from your perspective when you see somebody that truly, truly, truly loves what they do.
Sure. And, sometimes those are difficult conversations with somebody who's not enjoying what they're doing. But, again, back to the other conversation we were having a bit ago, I think my job is to try to facilitate success for those folks. So I don't necessarily feel really bad when somebody's in that position if I can get them, to move to a next stage. And I don't mean move them out of our organization because they're unhappy. I mean, get them to a happy place in life. What are they going to do that's going to be impactful, that's going to make them happy? Or can we change something about what they're doing, shift their role, shift their duties, provide additional support, something to have them feel differently about the way that their day is going? They're not excited typically for any number of reasons. Can we affect change in that space to make that happen, or help them to have a different viewpoint on their day and think about that impact that they're making if they're not really recognizing that as much as we hope they would?
Right now, and again, I want to kind of build one more question off of that. So as a leader, you can cultivate that communication, and you can start that conversation with your employees of, do you love what you do? Maybe there's a better role for you. How can we kind of get you to something that you're going to have an impact? What advice would you give to listeners out there who really maybe don't love what they're doing right now, but they don't maybe feel, or they're wondering, how can I take that to my superior? Maybe that's through a performance review, but how do I take that to my supervisor or boss and let them know that I really don't maybe enjoy the role that I'm in, and I kind of see maybe a different avenue that I want to go?
Yeah, I mean, that's challenging and it's intimidating for the person that needs to, breach that topic with their supervisor or leader. Hopefully their leader is somebody who's willing to listen, and, you're in this space, what it means to do annual evaluations, and how some people can see that as a very perfunctory, necessary task. I got to hand in my evaluation and it's going to go in the file. But it's a real moment. It's an opportunity. And from an employee standpoint, a faculty member that wants to get to the next level, a staff member that wants a different role, wants a new opportunity, that's a real moment that you can take advantage of, where you can talk to your employer, your supervisor, whomever, in that space, and hopefully get them to listen about your hopes and dreams and what you want to accomplish. Not just why you're unhappy, why your day doesn't go well, but what it is that you want to do. And then start to have a conversation in that space. So I guess the first thing is use those opportunities that come along. They're not perfunctory, not for folks who want to listen. And then secondly, find the person that wants to listen. Maybe it's in a lateral unit. Maybe it's not your supervisor. Hopefully it's your supervisor. But if it's not, find the person that is, that can hopefully begin that conversation with the folks that matter. So.
Thank you very much. And because again, that's something I've seen again throughout my career. So I really wanted to put those couple of questions in front of you, and thank you for those answers. I actually do have one final question for you.
Sure.
So are you excited? I know you're excited for hockey to come back because I can tell from the jerseys behind you. But what are the Penguins Stanley Cup chances when hockey does start up again? Are they going to have an advantage because of the shutdown? Because they got Sid the Kid, who's the best player in the world? What do you think about their chances?
Yeah, I think there's a huge advantage in the rest period, particularly because Getzel's coming back and he's working through rehab and the rest. So, I should disclose that I work with those folks. I have the chance to do their facial injuries through my UPMC colleagues and our work on the maxillofacial team. There's a handful of us that do that. And, I get to see them regularly, but not certainly during the COVID experience. So from my perspective, it's easy to turn on sports radio and have somebody say, our team's the best because they've had all this rest. Well, all the teams have had that rest, of course. But for us, it's particularly impactful because of that individual player and his impact in the last cup and what he's expected to produce, especially on the front line, and also a number of other players. So all bets are off. Hockey's a lot about timing and the way that players interact. It's sort of the ultimate team sport, the way that I see it. Hopefully they're all well conditioned and ready to go. And if they are, I think they have an excellent chance of doing it.
And you said it there. And I did not grow up a big hockey fan. And actually, when I moved to Pittsburgh about 5 years ago, I really started to enjoy hockey because of the success that the Penguins have had. Now, I always, I grew up in Johnstown. So when I watched hockey, I liked the Penguins. But what I realized, now I played basketball and did some of those things. There is no sport like hockey because, like you said, it's who gets hot. There's nothing that's more of a toss-up than the Stanley Cup than those playoffs. That format, it really is, because a lot of times in the NBA or baseball or even the NFL, right, most of the time the favorites are going to get there. But in hockey, it really is a toss-up.
It is. So you're right. There's a lot that can go this way or that way. The things that they can control are their mental state and the tenacity. There's a reason they say it's the toughest trophy in sports to win, both from a conditioning standpoint and an endurance standpoint, injuries and otherwise, but also the mental piece of that. It's a huge piece of that game. It's really, chess on ice in many ways, and dealing with those vacillations of success and lack of success. Some of the years that we've won the cups that we've won in Pittsburgh, you could feel that they were just better than everybody else. And some of the years that was not the case. And it was the other aspects that really carried them through the will, the tenacity, the desire to make sure that they were going to have that opportunity if the puck would just bounce the right way. And sometimes that's what matters.
And they have that championship pedigree already. So obviously that's a big advantage. But the year that they went back to back, again, somebody who didn't grow up really watching a lot of hockey, you don't get much time off after you win the Stanley Cup to when the next season begins. That is unbelievable that they were able to go back. Because it's only like a couple months or something like that the season ends. You won the Stanley Cup, right? That's in June, I think, right?
Typically in June, we would have won it by now if it was us.
And then they start again in August or September. That's not a lot of time.
No time. And you mentioned 87. So he's a really unique leader and individual. It's not just that he has the best complete game of anyone on both sides of the ice, but he's a great leader. He's incredibly intelligent. He remembers everything. And he's an unbelievable competitor. These people are just cut from a completely different mold in their ability to win and their desire to do that. And Sid is the pinnacle of that, without a doubt.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, Dean Costello, obviously I want to be understanding of your time. And I just want to, again, thank you, give you a thank you from me, from organization development. I know Mark, Diane, Laura, and Kelly, our team in organization development, we're so humbled and so thankful that you would be our first leader on the virtual blog that we're creating here. And like I said, I don't think there's a better leader out there that we could have started this off with. So thank you for your expertise. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for your willingness to come on here and kind of talk about your story, about your team. Is there anything else that you want to kind of leave us with? Maybe one final thing that you maybe want to leave us with?
Well, I think we're fortunate at Pitt to have this incredible platform of opportunity, and it's really for the taking. Whether you're a student, a staff member, or a faculty member, it's an incredibly rich environment. You've been here for a little while in Pittsburgh, you've grown up in this town and seen it evolve over time. I only came in 2001, but to watch the renaissance of what's occurred here and the opportunity that presents for Pitt, for UPMC, and ultimately the region, it's remarkable. We have a really unique opportunity at this university that other folks don't have, and with a culture to support that and good leaders to boot. So you'll have more on this show. It's my thrill and honor to be a part of this. So anything I can do for your group, I'm always happy to. Thanks for having me, Jordan.
Thank you very much. And we might be getting a couple other year leaders on here as well, Jim Earl, Marnie Oakley, who I've been able to kind of build a relationship with. So this won't be the end for dental medicine. We're going to have some other leaders. But like I said, we're so glad to be able to kick it off with you, with your school, because it is so well respected like I said, here at Pitt and across all universities. So, Dean Costello, thank you again, and I look forward to talking with you soon.
No, my pleasure. Thanks.